Yo, what's up guys? It's Talon, and today we're going to be talking about the part of the game that everyone kind of gets wrong. So there's really three parts of the game in my eyes, or three phases of the game, and that is going to be the early game, which is going to be 0 to 6 minutes before any objective spawn, obviously mainly focused on lane phase. Then there's going to be the point from 6 minutes to 11 minutes, which is when the first dragon and herald spawn, as well as usually the second dragon, but before the baron spawn. So it's again kind of you're more preparing for the later objectives by getting as strong as possible, getting dragons, getting turrets, getting gold, and whatnot. And then the 11-minute and onward is kind of going to be the late game, where you're really focused mainly on getting these key objectives like the Baron, like the Elder, and then really actually ending the game eventually. And so we're going to be talking about the late game, because in my eyes, this is the part of the game most people get wrong. In early game, you're laning. Most people know how to figure out how to lane, and usually, you know, again, it's pretty straightforward. Middle parts of the game, I definitely think a lot of people have issues there too, but it's not as impactful on the outcome of the game oftentimes as the late game. And so that's kind of the main thing we want to talk about. And so we're going to go over two late games, both games that are pretty hard, where I'm kind of losing and the game's not going well. And we'll talk about the mistakes of my opponents as well as what we do well in order to still win these games. So starting off, the first kind of thing is resetting around important timers and not being overly aggressive around other timers. So typically when you do want to reset, is right around 30 seconds before the Baron. So you don't want to be forcing a bunch of fights right about 30 seconds before the Baron, because then your death timer is going to be matched to the Baron. And so you want to make sure you get a reset first, which is going to allow you to get your gold spent, get you a lot stronger. So for example, here, we'll go back and kind of show you guys what I mean. Here, I reset for my Sundered Sky, even though there's kind of a fight being forced in mid. Instead of overforcing or overgrouping here, we're understanding that what's really important is not this 35-second fight, because if I died, obviously it's going to be very problematic, and if my teammates die, they'll respawn in time for the Baron. So even if my teammates do die here, it's not the end of the world. So instead, I'm going to reset first. Now, of course, once I'd reset, I can go and fight because I've reset, whereas obviously the enemy, who their Hecarim is kind of their very fed person, he ended up dying. Unfortunately, I messed up my dash over the wall, and so I do die. So it's not like an ideal situation here or anything like that. But what is important to note, again, is that you want to reset about 30 to 45 seconds before the Baron in order to properly prepare. So that's going to be like the first thing, is preparation right before the Baron, before you really enter that late game. A lot of people make the mistake of, again, overfighting like that Hecarim. That Hecarim was very fed, very strong, and yet he still went really over aggressive, forced a fight for no reason, and gave away his shutdown right before a very key timer, such as the Baron, which allowed my Kai'Sa to then easily be able to get to 2 items. Now my Kai'Sa is building kind of interestingly, so obviously it's not the most useful still on 2 items, but obviously, again, Hecarim giving away such a big kind of gold lead is very problematic. And then something that's also important is just being on objectives at proper times. Again, so we're at 11 minutes and 30 seconds. As I'm respawning, the enemy, multiple of them are on the wrong side of the map. So this is, again, general. It's not just for jungle. It's for kind of all parts or all roles. And again, oftentimes, all you want maybe on the side lane is going to be maybe your Baron laner or maybe a mid laner. You don't want multiple people on the opposite side of the Baron as it's alive. So you can see the Vladimir and the Set are very much overforcing on the wrong side of the map, which gives us a very nice opportunity to end up getting kind of a comeback staged here, because again, we understand that this entire late game revolves around the objectives. And so understanding that it revolves around the objectives and everything you're doing is in regards to getting these objectives is going to help you, be a lot better in the game. So again, Set, for example, could be on the side lane here, but his only reason to be on the side lane would be to push it out and then be able to rotate to help his team, because he's stronger and his team is stronger. If his team was weaker, then he would be doing what my side laner is doing right now, which is just go on the side just to draw pressure and get people away from the objective. But again, it's all with kind of the purpose of the objective in mind. My Sion is on this side of the map so that he can draw people away from the objective, and the enemy are stupidly getting baited into it, which allows us to flip this objective. Now, the enemy still have 3 people here, and so it's not like it's a guaranteed win, but because we're behind, we're happy to flip it. So you're going to see we actually lose this one. But you're going to see why this type of mindset and this type of playstyle is going to lead later to the game actually being a more positive outcome. But the reason we're okay with flipping that Baron, which flipping basically means taking a 50-50 where either their jungler could hit the smite or we could hit the smite, the reason it's okay is because we're behind. So since we're behind, if we hit that smite, we have a much higher chance of winning and coming back. If we lose the smite, not that much changes. Like, the enemy were already ahead, they were already in a much better spot, the game wasn't going well for us, and so we don't really lose very much there. So we have not very much to lose and a lot to gain out of it, which makes it a positive play. And of course, again, because one of the enemy or two of the enemies were caught on the wrong side of the map, that meant that we had the numbers advantage. So even if we did die, we had a very likely possibility of at least getting a kill or two out of it, which we ended up doing with, I think we killed a Hecarim there. And then because the Baron is not super problematic, since the first Baron only lasts a minute and a half, we don't lose out on anything crazy there. Whereas if we are, you know, again, very behind, we can possibly get gold bounties out of it or come back, get some turrets out and kind of, again, stop the bleeding, so to speak. Whereas, again, we just don't lose that much if we end up giving it up, which is why, again, understanding that the first Baron and the first, you know, the 11-minute onwards, like, the game kind of revolves around the Baron is very important. But then, again, another thing people don't understand in these types of games is just side laning. Like, I don't care about grouping in mid lane with my team as they try to defend Baron. I don't really need to be there as the tank. The reason I don't need to be there is because I'm not the wave clear. All you really need there is your wave clear and maybe your support to make sure they don't, you know, get dove. And then if they do get dove, then you go and help. But pushing out the side waves is another very important thing that people don't understand about the late game. So again, people don't understand very well that the game revolves very much around the objectives, the Baron and whatnot, rather than, you know, getting caught on side or being, you know, too focused on farm at that point in the game. And then again, people don't understand how important side waves are. So making sure that your side waves are pushed out before the objective spawns or when you're defending against the Baron. This gives you a lot of agency to do a lot more. So if we have the top lane and the bottom lane pushing into the enemy past what I would say the neutral point is, which is basically the middle of the lane, as you can kind of see my cursor right here. Basically, as long as the waves are pushed past the middle point in the lane, you're kind of in a good spot, because then it means that the enemy are going to have to catch that wave, and as they catch that wave, it gives you a chance to pick them off on the side lane, or to then rotate to another lane and kind of catch out people, because they're going to have numbers disadvantages. But generally speaking, again, playing around these side lanes is extremely important, and this is what my Sion does very well in this game, is he's kind of constantly getting that side lane pressure. And then what this allows us to do, again, is they have to focus on that Sion, which allows us to then kind of find these picks in mid lane, and then we find a couple picks onto the Vladimir and to the Morgana, which leads to Veigar kind of starting to come back a bit and is overall good for us. And so you can see here, if we're just continuing to have this type of fight, as Sion's getting all of this pressure, and these side lanes are pushing, you can see bottom and top lane side lanes are pushing, this is great for us. It doesn't matter that 3 of my teammates died. Of course, it's not ideal, but it doesn't really matter because, again, their deaths, they're going to respawn right around the Baron. It's going to be a little late, but they're going to respawn right around the Baron, and we have all this side lane pressure, which means the enemy don't get anything out of those kills. They got 900 gold out of the kills. We got 600 from killing them, and oftentimes shutdowns because we're behind. So the gold that we lose versus gain is not that different from the kills. And then because we have the side lanes pushing, it means that we can get turrets out of it like the Sion did. It means that we can get the gold from the waves, and it means the enemy lose the gold from the waves because it's dying to their turrets and whatnot. So all of these reasons kind of allow us to, again, stage a decent comeback, because, again, we understand that the side lanes being pushed out and the waves in general being pushed out is really the key to kind of winning. And then here, once again, I understand the game revolves around the objective. And so if you notice here, when I ended up recalling, I had a sweeper. What did I switch my sweeper to as I recalled? I switched to wards. Why did I switch to wards? Because I knew that my teammates aren't quite respawning in time, so I'm going to need vision to possibly steal or have control over that objective. And so you see here, I set up and get the scuttle, I get my ward on there, and then I reset to make sure I have my death dance. And now we understand, once again, if we see an opportunity to flip this objective, once we have some level of pressure, or once the enemy force a random objective, we're going to do that. And so we simply use the dragon as a distraction in order to just flip this Baron. And so once again, I'm just relying on my smite. I'm just saying, okay, like, if I can smite, then great. If not, we lose, because we were going to lose anyway. And this time you can see we land it. So we took 2 flips this game. We go 1 for 1 on them. And again, if I win 2 for 0, we're like definitely going to win the game. If I win 0 for 2, we're going to lose, but we're probably going to lose anyways, right? So understanding, again, that risk reward factor in the late game is super, super important, and understanding setting up for objectives. So once again, the enemy, they got baited into going for the dragon, and then we got the initial track onto the objective, and by the time they realized, it was too late for them to stop us, and so they just had to, again, flip it, which ended up being very positive for us. And then understanding kind of this other concept, which is the concept of tempo, is going to be really important. So you saw we get a good pick there. And then this is going to be a really game-changing kind of situation here. So basically, if we're looking at the situation, understanding death timers in the late game, that's another thing a lot of people don't do, is that they don't understand death timers very well at all. So here, my teammates are respawning in about 10 seconds. The enemy are relatively low. I'm a tank. I'm not that high health, obviously, and I don't have any mana for the most part. But you're going to see I'm going to stay up and continue to fight here because I have my gargoyle, and I'm high enough health to stall, and we're basically waiting for our teammates to respawn. This is a very common kind of comeback angle, is when the enemy do slightly overextend, especially when we have a Baron here. And so all I'm doing is I'm just trying to make sure the enemy don't recall, because then if they don't recall, if they end up trying to fight me, they're just going to be dying to my teammates afterwards. And so you can see here, I pretty much just walk at them. I'm just looking at them, you know, very menacingly. And I don't really care that they're ending up wasting all their spells on me, because they don't understand that all I'm really doing is sitting here and waiting for Veigar to come. So understanding death timers is super important. Again, if you die a minute before the objective, that's fine because you're going to respawn. If you die 30 seconds before the objective, very problematic. And then the same thing here, again, just understanding like, okay, you know, you need to reset because the enemy are respawning soon, whereas again, the enemy didn't do that. And now they're getting stuck on the side wave because we have the Baron. So once again, the Sion getting the side waves pushed out, his death is perfectly fine there. Why is his death perfectly fine? Because there's no objective spawning within the next minute. So we're able to get a bunch of pressure there. We're able to get free gold. And then, okay, why do I die here for the turret? Again, same thing. I know my death doesn't matter. So understanding when your deaths matter and when they don't. I unfortunately flashed. I shouldn't have flashed, frankly. But either way, we end up getting multiple inhibs, which gives us the ability to win the game. Which again is that constant side lane pressure applied by the Sion very, very well. And then us again using ourselves as distractions, stalling, making sure the enemy don't reset quick enough, looking for those picks and finding those flips around the Baron, ultimately is leading to this game now being in a possibly winning situation, despite, again, 19 to 33 in kills. Generally, my teammates weren't doing super well in lane phase. Again, Sion was kind of the only one who had decent gold and was in a decent spot. And then we just end up being in a position where we can still kind of scale up, and we're not in an awful spot. And you can even see, like, still Veigar does get picked off here, but the Sion does make, again, a nice play. Like, the Sion definitely plays super well here. And again, kind of the main things to take away from this that I again, think a lot of people don't understand about the late game is, again, that 11-minute Baron timer. That's a key timer where a lot of people, they end up over-aggressing and forcing onto a dragon, for example, instead of playing around that, understanding, again, the risk-reward. So you want to flip it a lot more if you're behind, whereas if you're ahead, you want to make sure you have complete control over that objective as soon as it's spawning. Understanding the resets, the proper timers. So I reset 30 seconds before the Baron in order to buy my Sundered Sky, for example, at 10 minutes and 30 seconds. Again, I make sure I stop the enemy resets when my teammates were respawning soon, and so that the Baron could continue to push out the sides. Understanding, again, pushing out the sides before you rotate to fights or before grouping for random mid fights and whatnot, where the Sion, again, is constantly getting that pressure on the side lanes, and now in the mid lane, since that's the last inhib that needs to be taken, drawing the enemy to other parts of the map. And again, where the enemy, you know, multiple of them were on the side lane when the Baron was spawning because they were getting distracted because they didn't push out their waves quick enough. So a lot of lack of preparation for objectives. Again, basically the entire late game revolves around objectives. Everything you're doing is leading up to those objectives. So you're farming and getting as much gold to be as strong for those objectives as possible. Then you're making sure you push out your side lanes so you don't have to push out your side lanes during the objective. And then once you're actually very, very close to the objective spawning, you're then pushing out mid. So it's kind of a sequence of push out the sides, oftentimes reset, then push the mid lane, and then go into the fight at the objective. And again, if you're stronger as a team, you often want people, you know, just zoning the objective, getting control over it, getting the side lanes pushed. If you're weaker as a team, you usually want someone drawing pressure on the side, like my Sion has, and then not really trying to get even numbered fights, but trying to get odd numbered fights. So again, once they force that 2v1 on the Sion, then we force the 4v3 on the Baron, and then we have, again, the numbers advantage. And then from there, we were able to obviously get this Elder Dragon. And from the Elder Dragon, you can see I do a nice job of keeping Sion in front of me so he can't ult me backwards. And again, we do some nice juking, and we just use the Elder to fight. So it's also important to note that now that we actually are stronger at this point in the game, I'm no longer just flipping the Baron. You can see I'm forcing the fights because we have the Elder Dragon. We're now slightly ahead in gold. And so I'm no longer concerned with just flipping Baron instantly. I'm concerned with fighting because now we're actually strong enough to win these fights. And then we notice, again, our Sion on the side lane getting that pressure. And because he's getting that pressure, I once again am paying attention to the map, and I'm just stalling. I'm walking at Misfortune not because I want to kill her. I'm walking at her because I know that I have the Sion pressure on the side. And the longer we're stuck here, the better it is for our team. So that constant side lane pressure, that constant awareness and the map awareness, understanding that, again, pushing out these side lanes is more important than kills. Getting these objectives is more important than kills. Understanding when you're weaker how to play versus when you're stronger how to play. These are a lot of things that people don't really understand. And then we're going to go into one more additional game, and we'll just skip over to it here. And we're going to kind of talk about similar concepts. I thought it'd be nice to have two examples. And so you're going to see a very similar thing here. So this time I was dead about 10 seconds ago, as you can see here. I was dead, so that's why I haven't reset properly. But then you can see here, if we look at the mistakes of the enemy, and this Lee Sin is a 49.6% win rate, 800 game challenger, so he's very bad. Very, very, very bad. And he's not bad because he doesn't understand early game. Like you can see, like he didn't play this early game well, but he does have a lot of gold, and he's a player who has relatively high gold per minute for someone with such a low win rate like himself. And largely the reason that he is bad in my eyes is not because he can't play his champion well. It's not because he can't get gold early game. It's because he doesn't understand what to do past the early game. And so we're going to see it already. As I've told you guys, obviously I died here, so it's a little different. But in his case, he didn't reset for the objective nearly quick enough, which means that now he's not going to be prepared for Baron, right? So because he's already on the side lane, as you can see at 8 seconds, he's not properly preparing. Then you're going to see he ends up resetting as the Baron spawns, which gives me an easy angle to just farm up and then go into the Baron. And then you're going to see he contests the Dragon instead of the Baron. And so he loses the Baron. We realize that he's on the wrong side of the map. But even before he was on the wrong side of the map, I see 2 of his teammates down here, so I know I can just try to force this regardless, even if he was here and we flip. And then he loses out on the Baron. So this common mistake, again, you can see 2 separate games where the comeback sort of starts from flipping this Baron. Again, the first time I actually lost the smite against the Hecarim, but this is kind of the timer we're looking at. And then here, we're looking for the pick onto the Jhin. He ends up stasising and kind of stalling quite a bit, but we end up going on to him, getting a kill, and then it's a pretty messy situation that doesn't work out like insanely well or anything. So again, you can see multiple situations. I'm just throwing my screen or whatever because I was mad my teammates weren't there, I guess. But yeah, like you can see multiple times, like it's not like the situations work out perfectly. You know, again, like this is not a bad outcome for the enemy. But again, these choices that they're making are what I'm obviously concerned with and what I'm trying to talk about. And again, it's the lack of awareness of this first objective in the late game is definitely like the initial thing that you can see. And then from there on out, again, things like not understanding death timers, not understanding the specific win conditions of the games, not understanding the objective value and the value of side lanes, again, overvaluing grouping in mid and fighting and fighting and fighting. Definitely some of the biggest issues here. So you saw, again, that objective timer. That's a thing a lot of people don't understand. Like the biggest thing people don't understand about late game is the 11-minute timer, like which objective matters more. And then you can see we're able to use this Baron still to get this pick and then get the side lane turret afterwards. So again, just using our Baron to push out the side lanes and really valuing that over other things. Again, you can see I'm already focused on pushing out the side lanes, and that's really what matters to me, is getting these waves pushed out. And then we can use a numbers advantage because Lee Sin shows here the Mordekaiser's top side, and obviously we killed the Akshan. So using numbers advantages in the late game, again, is just not something that people do super well. So you can see we end up using this numbers advantage to get a second turret out of this as well. So even though the Baron didn't necessarily get insane value, you see how on the back end of the Baron, we're able to get a lot of value from the fact that, again, the side lanes are being pushed naturally through the Baron, gives us some level of pressure, meant that Mordekaiser wanted to go respond. We find the pick on the Akshan trying to clear the waves, and then we use that numbers advantage really well. So you've saw multiple times, again, we use numbers advantage in these games to, you know, really stage comebacks. But it doesn't even have to be comebacks. It's just in general, like whether you're ahead or even or behind, you want to play around numbers advantages for the most part. And then just like simple awareness in games, like it's a really silly, you know, small thing to point out. But like here, they had a ward here. Lee Sin's walking here, and my Syndra's dead. I'm not just going to go force this blue buff, but what I can do is wait for him to try to invade it, and then try to pressure him off and look for a pick. And you can see, like, we didn't end up getting the pick, but very often those types of random little plays lead to some type of pick onto a champion like the Lee Sin. And then something you're going to see this game specifically is going to be target priority that's really valuable. Like, in the late game, I essentially think of it like, okay, say we're down, you know, 5,000 gold, but they have a 5,000 gold lead on one member. Well, if we kill that one member, all of a sudden their gold lead is now negative because he's dead. So like obviously, you know, they lose say 15,000 gold from just killing Lee Sin. Then they're all of a sudden way weaker than us. So this simple thing is really, really important to understand as well. Targeting the enemies, you know, who are the strongest, when you can, obviously is extremely valuable. And then you're going to see that, I think, in this fight in a second. But for now, obviously, we're just, once again, like if you look here, going back already to the start of it, we're all hovering around the correct side of the map. Like, what could be happening is that my Singed, ideally, my side laner, pushes out this wave and then rotates and helps us. But either way, you see how as the jungler and as most of our team, we're controlling the Baron side of the map already 37 seconds before it spawns. And we're already aware that this is really what matters. Controlling this, so Mordekaiser ends up making that silly play, and he ends up having to use his ult very, very early, which is not good for the Mordekaiser to have to use it that early. And then even though we're weaker in this fight, because we kind of had the start, or like the inside track in this fight, it's not such a bad outcome. It's still not great because we're, losing and the team's not playing very well. But then you're going to see here in a second the target priority. So I'm really paying attention to that Lee Sin, and if we're able to catch him out now that he used his QSS, we're going to instantly do that. And so when he ends up looking for a flank angle, this is when we're just instantly turning on him and understanding kind of who our key target is. Unfortunately, I kind of use my repulsor pretty bad, but once again, now that their fed person's dead, this is when we can try to force a fight. So you see, I went in harder there, knowing that I'm not going to fully kill and knowing I'm going to have to flash out, because I want to force something larger around this fight when we find the pick on someone. So we find the pick onto the Lee Sin, who is their most fed member, and now we need to look for, again, a bigger play. And then you're going to see us value the Baron again over the Dragons. So multiple times I'm giving up Dragons because it's just a losing game. Like in a losing game, these Dragons don't matter to you. At the end of the day, what matters is the Baron, because this is what's going to actually stage some level of a comeback for you. And so we do that, we get the Baron, and then we're able to get the Dragon, I think, as well, because we just use the pressure from the Baron to get the Dragon. So like you can still get the Dragon to deny soul if you're obviously able to, but it's just not like a priority. And then again, not flipping objectives when you're in a winning position. So even though the game is losing right now, it's a winning position because one of them was dead and we kind of had the pressure from the Baron, we have the Baron buff and whatever. So instead of just flipping the Dragon 50-50, I go straight onto the Lee Sin and we find the pick on him again. And then now that we found the pick on him, we're looking for the side lane to push it out. So instead of just going and grouping with my team in mid, again, I realized once again the value of the side lane wave. So I push out this side lane wave. I then use the TP thing to go to the other side lane wave. I get this pushed out, and then we push out multiple turrets, and now we get a bunch of different turrets here. And this is sort of where the game, again, fully turns around. So you can see valuing the side lane waves over other, things, especially when objectives aren't really, really close to spawning. So, a minute, 2 minutes before objectives, or obviously when you have the Baron, pushing out those side lane waves in preparation for these objectives to get yourself as much pressure as possible, and then really focusing on mid priority and getting the mid pushed once you are closer to 30 seconds, 45 seconds before the objective is going to allow you to, again, be in a much better position in order to fight these objectives, and then valuing the proper objectives. Again, these Barons are 99 times out of 100 going to be more valuable than the Dragon. Again, focusing on the flipping aspect of it, where you are okay with flipping when you're behind, and when you're obviously ahead, you want to more take the fight, because again, fighting when you're ahead, of course, logically speaking, just makes sense. Like when you're ahead, or when you're at the very least even in gold, like you're just going to do better in fights because you have more gold. So you're, again, more focused on these objectives, focused on these side lanes, getting that type of stuff, especially when you're behind. But again, just as long as you have preparation, essentially, like the gist of all of this is preparation. If you're prepared for the objective a minute beforehand, if you're aware of what's going to happen, 2 minutes in advance, 1 minute in advance, you're already setting up for these types of things. You're resetting in time, on time, whatever. You're going to be in a good spot. So even here, you see, this is exactly what I mean. Like, when did we get the side lanes pushed out? We got them pushed out with our Baron earlier. Now what's spawning? The Elder. And so what do you see me doing? You see me not focusing on going into the Dragon right away, because the Dragon still has 5 seconds. I'm preparing for the Dragon. How do I prepare? By getting mid prio. So again, getting the mid lane pushed out like this with my champion's good wave clear means that the enemy now are going to feel pressured, and then now we have that pushing, and then we also have the obviously inside track into the objective, because the enemy either have to just all get corralled into one area, as you see here, or they have to respond to the mid wave and then get, separated from their teammates. So either way, it's kind of a good situation because it gives me a flank angle, and then we're just able to play the fight from there. I honestly didn't even play this fight very well, but we still win it because of the setup and because of these earlier things we did to just be a lot stronger. So again, like you can kind of see a lot of, and unfortunately I missed that flash. You didn't see that, that didn't happen. But you can see a lot of the mistakes that people make leading to them losing late games. Because again, both of these late games, the enemy were ahead, like leading into it. The first game they were ahead a lot. This game they were ahead a decent amount too. They're at least in, both games their jungler was ahead multiple thousands of gold. In the case of the Hecarim game, again, he was up 4,000. I don't remember exactly what Lee Sin was up, but he was up a lot. And yet both of these games were able to be significantly more valuable to our team than them. And obviously we had some teammates, play well, obviously too. I'm not saying I'm the only reason that these games were won, but again, having this macro, especially this understanding of these barons, of those types of key things, are really important. So I just wanted to talk about a lot of the key things that lead to me winning a lot of these late games, even when I'm not in a good position, because this definitely is, in my opinion, the part of the game that people understand the least is the late game. I think the early game is very straightforward. The mid game, a lot of these similar concepts apply, but they're just less important because there's no barons. There's just nothing, game losing. But obviously, if you're like snowballing super hard, then you can win in the really early game. But yeah, that was about it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you thought of the video. I'll see you in the next one.